Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Buff Naggle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Buff Naggle the podcast. We're talking about all things good, the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a fantastic show today where I really have no idea what we're going to do, what's going to happen. But, like always, we're just going to, see what happens, take it for a ride, and we'll get there eventually, right? But, however, I can't do this alone. So, as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how you doing today?
Zach, I am outstandingly phenomenal. Is that a thing? I am fantastic. It is a great day to be doing a podcast with you. Thank you to all our listeners that are out there. We know you're listening, and we appreciate that. And as always, if you have something to say, if you need to contact us, send us a note at buffnaggle@buffnaggle.com. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. We're all over the place. Zach, we are so everywhere. Okay, the other day, like Valentine's Day is coming up, and the other day I got some of those candy hearts from your mom, and I was going to put those in a little dish, and I started looking through what they say, and they were like, "Be mine." It was like, "You're a star," and it said that. And one of them, I looked at it said, "Listen to the Buff." It said that right on the candy heart, Zach. We are everywhere that you need us to be. If you are new to our podcast, hey, welcome. We are glad you are here. Hey, give us more episodes and see if we don't give you a reason to come back for more. Talking about all sorts of different things, and surely there will be something that resonates with you. Remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And if you subscribe and give us a 5-star review, Zach, I get pudding.
Yep.
And you get?
I get a bunch of brownies.
Brownies, that's right.
Yeah, so today I think we're going to infinity and beyond, if I'm not mistaken, is what my notes over here have me.
That's what the notes say. And, back in the pudding episode that we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I forget what number that was, Zach. We did a proof. And I was like, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. We did a proof, and we proved that there was no largest prime number, that there was kind of like an infinite number of prime numbers. And we did that. We did the proof in the pudding. And that was one of the proofs that's in the pudding cups that I got. And so that raised a number of questions about the ability to count things that are really big sets and how to count in general. So I made some notes, Zach. I just labeled them thoughts on counting and infinity. And I think we should go through that because I think understanding the nature of counting, I know people are like, really? I'm listening to a podcast about counting? Yes, the count. We're going to listen to it, right? So we're going to do some talking about counting, and eventually we're going to get to infinity because infinity is where you end up if you just keep counting.
If you go on and on and on and on, you get there eventually. But interesting thing about counting is the fundamental principle behind mathematics. And mathematics, if you think about it, is probably the first creative human thing going back to ancient times.
Yeah, there's a lot of the stuff we're talking about is not new. That we're going to end up on some stuff that is pretty new, and by pretty new I mean less than 120 or 150 years old. But the concepts I'm going to talk about go way, way, way back, like even pre-Egyptian. Zach, we spend a lot of time talking about those, about What I guess I'll call them old civilizations: the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, and now
ancient
modern
civilizations.
That's the word I was looking for. I wanted to say prehistoric, but I knew that wasn't right because they had history. So how can it be prehistoric if they got history?
There could be prehistoric civilizations of dinosaurs. We don't know what their class systems were like. we don't know if they talked.
Hey, did you see?
I do know that The Land Before Time, they do talk in that movie, and that has dinosaurs. So that could be true.
They have dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs are presented as like, oh, this is cute. Wait, is that the cartoon one?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that what they go to find the hidden valley or something?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I watched as a child. Do you not remember that? Do you not remember my childhood?
I remember your childhood and having that video playing over and over and over in the car.
That's a pretty childhood.
Well, you know what? That's the thing with some of those movies that you guys used to watch. I know all the audio and essentially none of the video. because I was driving and it was in the back seat and I would hear it and I never saw it. And speaking of dinosaurs, I saw that there's this new Jurassic Park super apparently, and Zach, correct me if I'm wrong here on this, the Jurassic Park series has like 9 movies in it. Did you know this?
So this is the original 3.
And then there's
there
3
was
other
a
ones.
4th one.
Yeah, but there have
And then
been
they came
more
out with
since
the 5th
then.
one. Is this now a 6th one?
No, I think I think this is the last of the last ones coming out. I mean, there's like this one where they like discovered how to do it, and then another one they discovered that they screwed it up, and then this one is like apparently in one of those movies the dinosaurs get out, and now they are like everywhere in the world. You can't stop it. You built. Let me see if this makes resonates.
Okay. And so it's 6, not 9. So there's the original Jurassic Park, which was based on the Michael Crichton book, and then there's the sequel, The Lost World, which is also based on a Michael Crichton book, and then there's the 3rd one, which is not based on a Michael Crichton book. And then in 2015 they rebooted the series with Jurassic World.
Okay.
And then they had a sequel to that, and now they have a sequel to the sequel coming out in
next month.
Yeah, something like that.
Right. So is it only 6?
Yeah, and then there was in 2019 there was a short film, like a 10-15 minute movie that came out. Yeah, but the one that comes out in 2022 is June 10th, and it's called Jurassic World Dominion. Dominion.
Yeah, so the question is, who's in charge, the dinosaurs or the humans?
Uh-huh.
Right, and of course we
Aliens
have
show up.
Okay, there's a thought. I hadn't thought about that. That's we could have. You know what?
Alien versus Predator versus dinosaur
versus the Transformers. That would be something. Okay, so let me see if I got it right. So they do something. They start tweaking with science, and then it gets out and creates havoc around the world.
Didn't they prove that in like the first movie?
Yeah, but now it's like everywhere in the world. So, and the question is, they're now going to take over, and the dinosaurs are like impossible to stop. And of course, we have our friend, who's the main guy,
the minifig, Chris Pratt from
Chris
Lego
Pratt.
movie.
Apparently, he's the guy with the most Lego minifigs modeled after him for the different roles he's had. Yeah, because he was Emmett. All right, okay, we spent dinosaurs.
But if the dinosaurs are going to run around the Earth, you might as well have like Godzilla show up too. You know.
You know what? I don't think that would be great. We would see all sorts of interesting things if Godzilla, because wasn't Godzilla like a lizard that lived in the Pacific, and that we were testing nuclear weapons, and then he like grew, or she grew. Wasn't it a she or he?
I believe it's a he.
He? Okay. Well, whatever it was, grew to enormous size. But that same thing happened to King Kong, right? Weren't they the same?
No. King Kong was found on an atoll in like the Atlantic or something or in the Pacific.
Yeah,
and then he was just a really, really big monkey on an.
Oh no, he was no. But I thought everything was, because this all came out after World War II, when there were we were testing all sorts
of.
The
original King Kong was like based in like 1915 New York, which
you know what? I think
smart. But
I'm going to take that back. I'm going to take that back. All right, I think you're right.
Before World War II. Okay, so the original King Kong movie was 1933.
33. So that was pre-atomic stuff. You're right.
Yep. And then there was a reboot in 2005.
Well, there were reboots in between there, a lot of them, right?
Yeah. And then that one was also based in 33.
Okay, what about Mothra? What about Mothra?
Mothra is in the same type of big, giant animal universe. So it's just a giant moth. It's Godzilla, giant lizard, King Kong, giant gorilla. There's some other ones.
Here's this thing I think whenever I think about Mothra, because it was so terrible. But there was this lady who was in graduate school with us, and her name was Martha, and she was a very nice lady. And for some reason, we decided to start calling her Mothra because we thought that was funny, because the movie was funny. And Zach, when you get a nickname that you don't like, what's the worst thing you can do?
Get called by it?
No. Protest it.
Oh, yeah.
Because as soon as you say, no, don't call me that, everybody's going to call you that, right?
Yeah, but if someone says, hey, I don't like that nickname, you should respect them and be compassionate and kind and give them a little bit of grace.
Okay, so what if, let's say hypothetically, you meet this girl named Brenna. Hypothetically, you meet a girl named Brenna, and Brenna is a very nice girl, but she's one of these. She's very fit, and she works out and does
Kick your
kickboxing and
butt.
stuff, and she could kick your butt. And you're like, well, this like, and you just kind of affectionately refer to her as like Brennagade.
Yeah,
Would
that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So what if she doesn't like? What if that's a great nickname, a perfect nickname, and it's awesome, but she doesn't
Well,
like that?
that's like an actual like good nickname story. Unlike calling someone who's Martha, calling them Mothra. Like that's
Well, the thing was that Martha was not anything like Mothra. Martha was great, and she made cookies and stuff, and she actually had a family, and the rest of us were yahoos. But anyway, I think of that when I think of Mothra. So
all right.
Martha,
Anyways,
if you're listening, I'm sorry we called you Mothra, but it still was funny. Okay.
let's jump. Well, we jumped the shark on this one. So,
All right.
anyways,
Okay, so I'm going to go back to counting. Okay, counting goes way back, but you don't even have to count to do a lot of stuff that we used to do in the ancient world. Okay, Zach, let's say you're a shepherd.
yep.
Okay, so your job is
To count
is
sheep. One sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep, 4 sheep, 5 sheep, fall asleep.
Yeah, that's right. That's the rhyme from when you were a kid, right? But you don't have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to take care of your sheep. Okay, you don't have to know anything about numbers to take care of your sheep. Okay, so if you're the shepherd and your job is to take the sheep, like maybe at night you kind of keep them in this little pasture or in a paddock or in a cave or something like that, and then in the morning you take them out so they can whatever. What do sheep do? They forage,
Sheep things.
they hunt and gather, whatever they
Sheep
do.
things.
They do sheepy. They are sheepish during the day. What you do, Zach, is you make a little pouch, like a little leather pouch about the size of a leather pouch. All right. And then when the sheep come out of the cave, everyone that comes out, you drop a little pebble into this pouch. Okay. And then the last sheep is out of the cave. You go, shoop, you tie it up, you tie that on your belt, and you go do sheeping all day long. You watch them, you chase the wolves away, you do everything you're supposed to do, and then you bring them back in and put them back in their little beds at night. And you say, go to sleep, little sheep. But when they're going back into the paddock, what you do is you reach, for everyone that comes past you, you take one rock out of the pouch. All right. And then at the end, when it's like, oh, well, all the sheep are in, and you look in the pouch. And if there's no more rocks in the pouch, then you have all the sheep. Right.
Or you lost a rock.
Or you lost a rock. Because you make sure there's not a hole in your pouch. All right. So if there are rocks left in the pouch, then you have to go find that many sheep. And you don't even have to know that that's 3 or 2 or 7 rocks in the pouch. You don't even have to count them. You just have to know when you find sheep, you take another rock out of the pouch. So there's no need for any numbers here. Okay. You're doing what mathematicians call one-to-one correspondence, right? Every rock stands for a sheep, and every sheep stands for a rock, and that's 1-to-1. So you don't have to do any real mathematics. And that's a thing that goes way, way back, like the Sumerians and like the pre-Sumerians, whatever they would be, the Primarians. I don't know. It's way, way back. Those guys. Let's say you live in the village, or you live in the farming village, and you have to put your grain into the granary because that's what you guys do to. I don't know.
The grain in the grain elevator.
In the grain elevator, yeah, we know what that is, Harry. So we're gonna put the grain in the granary, and let's say you deposit 12 bushels of you have all this grain in then bushels, and they take them in there. And what they would do, this is a real thing, Zach. They would have these. They would have these.
I heard it on a podcast.
No. It is amazing how many times, Zach, I'm watching Jeopardy now. When I watch Jeopardy, and they'll have a question, and I'll get it right, and your mom would be like, "How'd you get that?" And I'll be like, "That was on the podcast last week. Weren't you listening?" And she was like, "Well." So it is. We should have an episode. There should be a category on Jeopardy: things I only learned on the Buff. So there. Okay. All right. So they had these. They had like a little clay jar. Okay, and they would do that when you put a bushel in there. They would drop a little rock into the jar. Okay, and they would write your name on it. All right, and then when that was done, they would put a cover on the jar and seal it. And put your name on it, put it on the shelf, right? When it came time to make a withdrawal from the granary, whatever you do, they would go find your little jar and they would smash it open. and you would get one, whatever it was, one, maybe you trade the grain for shoes or however it works, but you would know how much grain you put into the granary by looking at the rocks that were in the little jar. And then it progressed. They were like, we're wasting a lot of jars doing this. We have to make the jars, we crack the jars, we got to clean up the messes. So they figured eventually, what we should do, we should just put a tick mark on the outside of the jar for every bushel that you put into the granary. And then we could just look at, we don't have to break it open. We can just look at the tick marks. And you know how to do a tally, Zach. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then slice with a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's easy to count those up. We used to do this tally thing when I was a kid. When we would count, we could count to 10 with this tally. We'd make a square with 4 dots.
Yep.
Sorry, dot, 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 dot. And then 4 lines to connect the dots would get you 8. And then we would put on X through it, 9, 10. So therefore you have a little symbol that indicates 10. And there are lots of different ways that ancient civilizations used to count. And they would have little tick marks and tally marks. But the idea of one-to-one correspondence there between the tick marks and the items you were counting, that's the fundamental process of counting. Okay? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, now for what it's worth, I have a book.
You have a book.
I have a book. I learned all this stuff.
You know how to read.
I read very well. All right. I have this book, and it's called A Universal History of Numbers, and it's about this thick. It is, as you can see, it's like 2.5 or 3 inches thick. It's a really big book, and it was written by this high school, or I think maybe a middle school math teacher who would get little questions from his students, and he was like, I didn't know the answer. So I looked him up, and he traveled all around the world, and he found these, papyrus scrolls or clay tablets with marks in them, and he studied all these ancient civilizations. And I learned all sorts of things, like, you know how to count on your fingers, Zach, right?
Yep.
Right? So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But not every civilization counts that way on their fingers. Okay, so here's what some Indian cultures do. So you take your thumb and you put it up in here next to your pinky, okay? And this joint between where your pinky attaches to your hand, that's 1. And then the next bend in your pinky is 2, and the next bend is 3, and the tip of your pinky is 4. And then you go to your ring finger, and you go 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you go to middle finger, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you go to your index finger, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I can count to 16 on this hand. Right? And I read this in the book, and they had the little sketches of this guy's hand. It's a really wonderful book. And I'd never met anybody who had done that. But then I worked with this lady at one of my jobs, and she was from India, and we were counting up. We were doing some joint programming, and we were counting the size of a loop. It goes from 278 to 291, and is that 13 or 14 or 12? And you know how to.
Yep.
And I was kind of counting on my fingers very, very crudely with this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I looked over, and she was
American version.
But
it's
there are
not a graceful version.
It's not as graceful as what they were doing, but we don't. Having kids learn to count with rocks, with little calculi. That's what they're called. Those little stones in the jars. It's a really helpful thing to do, because then they learn this concept of one-to-one. So those counting numbers, and you said mathematics or counting is the fundament of mathematics, right?
Well, it's probably the fundament of like academic learning outside of, well, it is. Well, mathematics existed before the Greek philosophers came up with philosophy. Mathematics already existed. It was a thing. It shows up in early Middle East. It shows up throughout Egypt. It shows up with the Greeks. The Romans probably messed something up with it. And they did. They invented Roman numerals. They messed up math. And then we eventually got rid of that. They look cool. But other than that, they're not great at the actual tactical process. And then in the East, you have the Chinese, Japanese civilizations. And like you mentioned, the Indian civilizations all had unique takes on math on numeric systems and being able to count and create things from that. And so math becomes this fundamental academic basis, even depending on the civilization, maybe before written language.
The civilization, I guess that's probably a, what would you call it, a necessary component for the development of civilization, right? Is some sort of understanding of mathematics. All right, now there are civilizations that this book has it's an incredibly rich book of everything you never even thought you didn't know is in there. All right, things like there are cultures they've found around the world that don't count past like 2. So the concept is called 1, 2, and a bunch. Right. So the idea is like how many, you go talk to the tribesmen and you say how many were there, and they'll just say many. Whether it's 7 or 700, it's still many. Right. So they recognize 1, they recognize 2, and then everything else is a bunch because there was no need to develop a number system that accounted for more than that. There are some civilizations that they only count unpaired and paired. So if you're by yourself, you're unpaired, and then when you're with somebody, you're paired. And you add another one, you go to unpaired, and then you go back to paired. So it's like binary, but it's not even like you don't even count
pre-binary.
Yeah, it's just matched or unmatched, and that's a system for dealing with numbers and dealing with concepts like one-to-one and set matching.
Well, I mean,
right?
like especially too, if you look back to ancient civilizations, there was a lot of agriculture, there's a lot of farming, and there were a lot of like, how do we do architecture? And I'm not very smart, but what I do know about architecture is that there are very important math components built into like how you do a roof or how do you fill in a driveway or whatever else ancient civilizations were dealing with. If you were an Egyptian, it was like, how do we move a stone from point A to point B so we can get it on the pyramid? If you're a Druid in England, it's just like, how do we move these rocks from one place to another place and create Stonehenge?
Those are practical, like physical problems that had to be solved, and you have to have. We talked last week, Zach. Did we talk about Newton inventing
Gravity?
calculus so that he could invent gravity? Right,
but no, other way around.
Oh, that's right. But he did the calculus, and he did all his stuff with colors and light. But those were physical problems, but they require, underneath it, they're going to require some sort of mathematical basis. Physics is applied mathematics. All right. And chemistry is applied physics. And biochemistry is applied chemistry. And biology is applied biochemistry. And sociology is applied biology. Right. So there's they all run in this sequence, but it starts with this conceptual idea of mathematics and what we will call the natural numbers.
Yeah, I think it's important too, and this maybe I'm slightly biased here, but like in college, we had to we had to take classes that weren't just our major. Like you had to take math classes, you had to take history classes, you had to take these holistic understanding of the world classes, more for the lack of a better term. And in doing that, you are if you're a psychology major and you take a biology class or some type of science related class, that information and that knowledge is going to be able to affect you in your psychology work, and it's going to allow you to have an elevated level of understanding of that stuff. And all of that stuff, it builds, it completes. Should I go on this rant? Should I not go on this rant?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll edit it up.
We live in a society now where we get so binary and so fixed in the fact that like, I'm X. It's like, yeah, you're X, but you can also learn about Y. And if you learn about Y, it's going to benefit and it is going to create so much better in your X understanding. I see this a lot with people I went to law school with. It's just like, yes, you're a good lawyer, you're a good attorney, and you know all these academic things. Do you also know, one, the other side's argument to be able to have that effectively? And two, do you have the requisite understanding and knowledge? Maybe it's a history component lesson to understanding why constitutional law is applied in a certain way, or why it exists in a certain way, or why it even is included in the Constitution to begin with. That stuff is important and fundamental to understanding and elevating our way of life and our ability to impact people. If you're just a math person and you don't know anything about biology, yeah, those on the surface might not look like they're similar, but like the biology components and the way like evolution works and pungent squares, and these are just random biology terms I'm thinking at the top of my head here.
Punnet squares.
Punnet squares.
Pungent squares are squares that smell really bad.
Nice. But if you have that understanding, your ability to do math is going to be elevated. My own case, like I took a lot of economics classes. I did not understand calculus until I used calculus in my economics classes, because I'm like, now this makes sense. This is what I'm doing. This is why this curve is set the way it's way. This is why the elasticity of demand for certain things is set lower than the elasticity of supply, which is going to create this type of problem, which is going to affect the business in one way or another. That's an elevated level of thinking that I would not get if I didn't take the time to understand the math or understand the economics. Instead of just binary focusing on I'm X, I do this one thing. It's you take the holistic education, you dump it all in a big mixing pot, you and then you consume it, and you create more than the sum of its parts.
There's this famous article, at least it's famous to me, and I tell people about it, and if I tell enough people, it'll get famouser. There's an article in one of our statistics journals that is entitled
one of our Buffnagel episodes.
Well, this episode's famous right now. This is famous, man. And they the article is called something like math is music, statistics is literature, I think is what it's called. And it's written by Dick DeVoe and somebody else. It says this. It says that you can be a prodigy, a child prodigy in mathematics and in music. Look at Gauss, Zach. I mean, Gauss was doing this like super duper adding up stuff when he was in kindergarten and torturing his teachers. Mozart was composing sonatas and stuff at three. Okay, how many of you know 3-year-olds? Okay, this guy's and if you saw the movie Good Will Hunting, he says Will says to the girl at one point, he says it just clicks to me. It just makes good sense. Some people sit down at a piano and they can just play, but I see this math and I can just do it. It just math. It just goes, right? You can do that in math and you can do that in music because they live in a self-contained. It can be self-contained, a self-contained universe, rules. Right? And you apply the rules, and they just everything you do with numbers follows from these definitions that were before it. Everything from complex variable integration all the way to spectra for colors of light coming from stars. All of that it sits on this rigid fundament. But then the guy switches tacks and he says, when's the last time you read a piece of really great literature written by somebody who was under the age of, 30? And he said it's really, really rare, because in order to write good literature, you need to have
life skills.
Well, life skills, you need to have understanding of the human condition. Okay. And the thing that makes, for example, the reason Shakespeare is held up so high in the Western canon is because of his unprecedented, unequaled, incredible understanding of the human condition and what it's like to be human and to deal with the moral universe, right? That's what makes Shakespeare valuable. And it's hard to read. It was written, 500 years ago? Is that right? 400 or 500?
More or less.
Early 1600, right? Give or take? Yes, that's 400 years ago. All right, so, but he has a great understanding of the human condition, and the human condition wasn't a lot different then than it is now. We have different problems, but the core problems that we're facing are the same. All right, and the article goes back and it says, if you're going to be a good statistician, you need to have understanding of data, and that only comes with age. I could do all the mathematics that sat underneath my statistics degree. I could do all that when I was in graduate school. But it hasn't been, except for the last 10 years or so, that I've really understood what these guys were writing back in the 1930s and the 1920s, right? What they were really doing. And that only comes with experience, looking at a lot of data and understanding I'll call it the data experience instead of the human condition. And I agree, Zach. You ought to learn as much as you can about as many things as you can while still being an expert in at least one thing.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing. You see that today all the time in youth sports. I'm going to go on this rant too while I'm at it. athletes are specializing in a sport at 12. Are you kidding me? You're not good enough to specialize in a sport at 12. You might be at 18. You might be. But if you play basketball, go play soccer in the summer, work on your footwork in a way, or play lacrosse or do something like that in your off season. Do a sport that's going to be fun and engaging and is going to strengthen and create more opportunity for you in the future. If you're a really good football player, go play rugby and have some fun and do something creative in that way. If you're a hockey player, don't play hockey every month of the year. Go play lacrosse, go play something else. Like, work on other types of skills that are going to be beneficial to the thing that you really want to focus on. Eventually, you'll get to the point, well, one, you only have the time to do one thing, and two, you get good enough at that one thing that you can only focus on it. But you're not at that point, and most of us in our adult lives probably aren't at that point academically either. Yes, you can have your passion and your understanding for math and statistics or whatever else it may be. That doesn't mean you don't read about art or literature or psychology or whatever else it may be. That's something that interests you, and you need to chase that impulse. And because by chasing that impulse, you're going to get better at the thing you're doing.
I hear you. I knew this kid I didn't know him in high school. He was in high school. I was a grown up. And he was like one of the smartest kids I know. He was like this, brainiac genius kid. And he had taken all of the advanced classes that you could take at this high school. Right? All of them. He had taken every one of them. He couldn't take any more. He was out of classes. He was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. They won't let me take stochastic differential equations at the local community college or something like that. And I was like, well, my first thought was, you won't understand that until you get older anyway, even if you can do all the math. But the second thing is, well, why didn't you take something else? I said to him, why don't you take art? And he said, art? I'm not any good at art. How could I take art?
Not with that attitude.
See, but that's the whole point, right? You don't take art because you're good at art.
You take art because you love art.
Because you want to learn it.
We've talked about this on the podcast before. I draw all the time in my spare time now. All the time. I'm drawing little animals, little just like sunset pictures. Is any of it any good? No. Is it fun and enjoyable for myself? Absolutely.
I'm sure you're learning stuff now too, right? Like, you're like, okay, look what I learned about shading. Look how I learned how to make a reflection. Look how I learned how to make shadows. And I think, and then once you learn that, and then you go back and look at the people who were really good, you're like, oh, now I have the art appreciation. And didn't you took art appreciation?
Yeah, I took 3 art related classes in college.
Right, and those become a way to make your life fuller. Don't let the people in charge tell you can only be an automaton, that you have to just be a cog in the big wheel, that your only value to the society is generating wealth, right? Your wealth is more than the dollars you produce. They are very important. Don't get me wrong there. I'm not saying you should just sit on the sofa and draw pictures like Zach does.
I work.
I'm teasing. I'm not saying you should just sit on the sofa and draw pictures, right? I'm saying you should do all the things you are called to do, right? And be a productive member of society and make the human experience a better experience.
Yes. And on that note as well, go suck at something again. It's okay to suck at something because, it means you can get better. It means you're curious about something. It means you want to learn and engage on that. And I think there's beauty in that human experience. There's beauty in the fact that, you can suck at something, you can do it poorly, but you're curious and you want to learn how to do it better. Maybe it's music, maybe it's art, maybe it's math, maybe it's more an academic skill. But whatever it may be, don't be afraid to go suck at something because you haven't arbitrarily put yourself in that box. Don't let yourself be arbitrarily put in that box, and break the box. Make yourself a new, better box that allows you to do the stuff you want to do.
That's right. It's a humbling experience to go try something new and then go see how good other people really are. It's one thing to appreciate it from afar and say, yeah, these guys are really good. But it's another thing to try to do what they do. Aren't you the one, Zach, that says in the Olympics we should always have somebody who's a regular person in every event?
Yeah, you have me in every event because then I get to go to the Olympics. That's a win. And then 2, you get to see how absolutely incredibly skilled these athletes are.
That would That would be wonderful. And I always thought they should have like a lottery for a person to be on the men's basketball team. You pay here's how you raise money for the Olympic team. You pay $10 or $100, whatever. You pay $10, and you get a chit in the bin, right, with your name on it. And then they pick 11 superstar basketball players, and then one guy out of the barrel, or it could be whoever it is. Doesn't matter. It could be a 5-year-old. It could be some 9-year-old guy. It could be you, Zach, or me, or it could be anybody, right? And they get to play with the dream team.
Yeah,
like that would be, and it would be incredible that if they were any good, they'd be like, I'll just sit here on the end of the bench and watch here. This is great. I'll pick up towels after practice.
Yeah.
But that would be the whole thing. Would be they have to be a member of the team. It's got to be a member of the team, and the players. I think if it was the right player who got chosen, that would turn the world around. That kind of
I think it would be such a cool thing. It was just like, here's our best of our best at Winter Olympics going right now. So these are our best of the best figure skaters. We got Zach Donahue, whose name is spelled differently. U.S. figure skater is Zach Donahue, whose name is spelled differently.
Yep.
I'm an Olympian.
That's a skater.
But you have that. But you also have somebody who's just like, this is the person who represents our country for this sport, and it's just the random lottery. And like, I think it'd be cool to see like those people and just like engage in the fact, and like one, we get to appreciate the talent level of those athletes, or of those musicians. It's same thing with like an orchestra. Like, if you can go see the Philharmonic Orchestra, and then there's a random guy playing violin.
Well, maybe you can't have him play violin. Maybe he's got to play like the triangle or something like that.
But he's still engaged in the process, and it's just like you get to appreciate and you get to sink in that moment of something being special. It's like, here's this thing that I get to be a part of. I might not be very good, but like it's going to give me joy, and it's going to like elevate. Again, there's that word again. My way of life, what I'm doing, and the other things that I do maybe as a profession.
Well, Zach, okay, so we
started. On topic?
This is on topic. Here's what's going to happen, Zach, is we have taken this concept of infinity, and we're not even back on we need to get back on the number line, Zach. So here's where we're going to go. Just so for those of you who are tuning in either next week or whenever the second half of this episode goes. We're talking about the natural numbers, the counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the natural numbers. We're going to pick up with those sometime when we get back. But in the meantime, Zach, you are exactly right. Go do something to make you better. We had an episode a while back about build more, about consume less, produce more. Right? That's a thing. Like, go make the world better. And you don't have to do it. Zach, you don't have to like create a bridge across San Francisco Bay. You don't have to you don't have to be George Bailey and build a skyscraper 100 stories tall. You start I'll borrow the phrase, your build back better. You do that, but you do it where you live locally with you. Start right at you and spread that out. And if you make yourself better and one other person, this whole world is going to be a great place to be.
Yeah, that's so true. I think, this is kind of the universe I live in. These are the things I love to talk about. It's just like finding those moments to better yourself, because it's going to impact you and is going to have this multiplicative effect of how you're able to impact and relate with people. And it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. It's a beautiful thing to experience, and it's a beautiful thing to grow. With that said, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.